Hello and welcome everyone to today's monthly call with Citizens Climate Lobby. My name is Brett Cease. I have the wonderful privilege of serving as CCL Senior Director of Education and Engagement. And as both Madeline and Mark are busy at our annual board meeting today, I get to be your host. So I know that we've got groups calling in from throughout the United States and larger world, and wherever you might be tuning in from today, we're so glad you're here with us and you're in for a real treat with our amazing speaker today, Marcelo Mena, CEO of Global Methane Hub. As we get started today, I'd love to invite all of our attendees that are here today to click on that link that you're seeing in the chat. That's that's pollev.com/CCL123. If you'd like to share where you're calling in from today on our interactive Poll Everywhere map. You can just click where you're at on that image and we'll display that in just a minute to highlight how far and wide all of our attendees are coming in, calling in from today. And as you share your location, a special welcome to our new chapters in New Hampshire Seacoast and New York University for joining us. If you are new to CCL and joining us for the first time today, each month, we as Citizens Climate Lobby supporters gather together for our monthly meetings where we do four things. We educate ourselves by listening to a guest speaker. We celebrate our success and growth. We take turn to practice and we act. And speaking of acting, we've also been mobilizing CCLers to write their House representatives, asking them to co-sponsor the RISE Act. And we are now extending that action to include senators as well. So we'll be sending out an email and text message with a link next week and encourage you all to take that action right now, even if you've written your representative before. We'll put that link in the chat right now, so you can do that even right now or even during your meetings. All right, so as you are taking action, let's see where we are calling in from today. It's great to see the distribution here throughout the US. If we've got international attendees, feel free. I see a couple of links in Mexico and the ocean as well. Wherever you might be calling in from, keep on putting those links in the chat. We are so glad that you're joining us today, and it's wonderful just to see the distribution of states and locations where we are called into joining in action today. And what a month we've definitely had here in December already. I know that over 1,500 of us attended our December conference this past weekend, and we were blown away with the caliber and the depth of that lineup of speakers and topics, obviously, that were featured from climate champions like Senators Tina Smith, my own state of Minnesota's senator, Representative Paul Tonko, former Representative Carlos Curbelo, to all of the amazing presenters we had come in from national organizations, from groups like the Niskanen Center, Rewiring America, American Forests, and the Bipartisan Policy Center. It was an inspirational and energizing event, and a highlight for me is always seeing the strength of our volunteer leaders, especially as they serve as mentors and play a member of Congress for our mock lobby meetings during the climate advocate training. But I also have to say how blown away I was by our incredible volunteer keynote speaker, Giovanna Gigi Santo in Florida. Her exposition on leadership was amazing. And at the end of the call, if you want to stick around, we'll actually feature an excerpt from Gigi's reflections. We'll also just say this: if you missed any of those sessions or want to relive the magic with your group, know that all of the videos and slide decks are uploaded onto CCL Community and YouTube for your enjoyment right now. So Todd's going to put that link in the chat so it's easy to remember. The link is simply cclusa.org/presentations. And we would love to have you be able to highlight that with your teams as well. So with that, though, what we'd also love to do today is transition, obviously, to our esteemed guest speaker. And let me introduce our guest of honor by way of an introduction, because Marcelo's essential work is also personal for me. 16 years ago, in the fall of 2006, I had the chance to spend a half a year in the southern Aysén region of Patagonia, Chile, backpacking, mountaineering, and sea kayaking through stunningly rugged and windswept terrain. From temperate rainforests to ocean fjords, the entire time we journeyed through this remote country, we were surrounded by beauty, and it left an indelible mark on my soul. I still think about the conversations that we had out in the steppes with the Poblador ranchers, sharing so earnestly how their lives and their livelihoods were threatened to be impacted by the expansion of impending huge energy projects, the damming of rivers, the construction of new large coal plants, all to send that energy far away to a capital city in Santiago that many of them had never even been to. It was devastating. And here's where the good news comes in. Rather than be resigned to that vision of the future, a bold alternative path was pursued in Chile in the following years that bet on the needed energy demands being met by more localized solar and wind projects. And as Minister of the Environment of Chile, Marcelo's team was instrumental in making that bold vision work. And in his role as the Minister of the Environment, he spearheaded multiple international environmental initiatives, helping craft a landmark agreement to phase out coal power generation. And now, with his extensive experience as a scientist, activist, former professor, and policymaker, Marcelo works as the CEO of the Global Methane Hub, a philanthropic alliance to support a methane emission reduction effort around the world. As climate advocates, we know that reducing methane emissions will be one of the keys to staying within that 1.5 Celsius degree warming threshold. And on today's call, Marcelo is going to offer his perspective on what steps are being taken to lowering methane emissions, his reflections on his time as a public official and Minister of the Environment, as well as the recently convened COP27 climate conference. So with that, Marcelo, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the great intro, and it was great that we got to talk about this common history that we had and commitment to keeping the Patagonia pristine. And I'll tell you both stories. First off, as you said, Chile was marred by a lot of environmental conflicts, and I have to say, and that's why it's so important the citizens, what they could do, is that it was because of many unreasonable people, I like to call, is that we actually achieved what we are achieving today, in which the protests actually were huge, and the opposition to large hydro and large coal-fired power plants was tremendous. And within 10 years, the citizen opposition pulled the plug on at least 10 gigawatts of dirty power, and power that would have flooded the Patagonia and would have hurt and impacted the biodiversity irreversibly. And we actually had something that many of the people were promoting, which was renewable energy, at our reach. And we started hearing, the rising energy cost, and that, that lower hydroelectricity would cause us to have increased energy costs. And people were just saying that, without flooding the Patagonia, we would have to have a dirty power from coal. And we approved in 2012 huge power plants that never saw the light because of the opposition from the people. And everybody was just saying, it's either we do nuclear, coal, or natural gas, but the other options were just thrown off the table. And for the first time, then energy sector started becoming more dirty than the transportation sector overall in terms of emissions. And it was a very hard fight, because there's a big commitment from the political establishment to have these large hydro power plants. But in 2014, there was a shift. It was really important. The first thing that President Bachelet did was to say, we're not going to do those big hydro projects, starting with Hidroaicén, and that we'll do something different. We'll choose a different pathway. There's a Minister Maximo Pacheco and Minister Paulo Badanier. I was a vice minister then. Enjoyed myself way too much in comparison to the very solemn process that was actually pulling the plug on that project. But still, people would say that energy price would continue to rise, and uncertainty would be something that would come if we didn't have this large hydro project. But we decided something else. Now, I have to say, most countries in the world have to choose two paths. And I'll tell you a little bit of what the information we know about the path that Chile should take is about. First off, we see, for example, Swiss Re, the reinsurance company, rating and looking at the Chile and many of the countries in the world will lose around 8 to 27% of their GDP by 2050 in different climate scenarios. But on the other hand, when I was at the World Bank, we commissioned a study that highlighted that if we had a net zero pathway, actually, we would actually grow more. It would actually spur more investment. And so, therefore, the path to us is clear. It's politically a consensus, and it's something that we are building on government after another one. We started an energy revolution that started with putting a price on pollution. And so we were the first country in South America to put a carbon tax on emissions. But that carbon tax wasn't just a carbon tax by itself, it also included a pollution tax for local pollutants. And that really led to significant emission reductions. And the first picture was a picture that I got from people saying, that when I was a professor, that the power system would shut off its emission controls whenever there would be lack of enforcement. We put instruments in these smoke tax that actually see the compliance in real time of emission standards, but also there's a tax that they pay. So when I went to 2017, I actually saw the operator looking at two things: how much tax they're paying, and they're trying to reduce it as much as they can, and in terms of if they're meeting the standard. And that has led a significant reduction of local pollutants too. So that goes to show that we built something on two things: an emission standard, a power plant, a power plant emission standard, a carbon tax, a pollution tax, and that has contributed to the power sector become much cleaner. But also, this also brought increased capital cost for new power. The green tax increased the operational cost. We also added energy auction reforms, and therefore all these things contributed in as a group to kill coal. And the coal phase out was something we were able to conclude and achieve and sign. Since then, we're talking about these decisions were around 2018 on the coal phase out, and the power reform was 2014. Chile today, as it's been many years, it's the most attractive market in the developing countries for renewable power. But the most astonishing thing, I gotta say, is that we went to virtually zero solar and wind to around 30% by the end, but right now, and by the end of the year, we'll reach 35% of our power. So basically, a third of our energy is coming from solar and wind, and it was unsubsidized. It's actually helping us keep energy costs down, and it's something that will not be reversible. So that led to us joining the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and we agreed on phasing out the coal power generation. This has led many to believe that we could actually think about 100% renewable energy. And we recently published a study at, at my university in which we saw by the people from Chile Sustentable and Gas Engineering. And they said essentially that if we phase out also natural gas, it'll be cheaper in the short term than maintaining our dependence on fossil fuels that will only bring uncertainty in terms of the energy costs for the future. And even the establishment operators are thinking about 100% renewable energy future. So things have changed in the way that we see energy today. And the rhetoric today only should make us believe that it is this war, this Putin war, that's causing these energy prices to rise. And it's been renewable energies that have been leading us to have more economic stability. I'll give you the example of electromobility too. And another thing that we should also bear in mind is that we should also build air pollution policy with climate policy. Santiago has had 30 years of pollution abatement. We've reduced emissions around 70% to the concentrations of PM 2.5, and we have Euro 6 as a standard. And since we have Euro 6 as a standard, we were able to have actually electric buses. We have a 5-year anniversary of our electric buses recently. It's still the largest fleet of electric buses outside of China. Each bus operates at a 74% lower energy cost. These are a World Bank study that we commissioned also while I was at the World Bank. And it saves the system around $42,000 a year. And so actually it pays for itself in a 3-year contract. But if you think about it now, the increased diesel costs have actually expanded that difference. And now every single bus is saving the system around $60,000 a year. So therefore, the consensus is that we should aspire to 100% electric buses. Another reflection here is that open markets are important, and protectionism only hinders the climate revolution. We need to have access to the cheapest technology wherever it's available. Super cheap electric buses from China actually make competitiveness and make the rhetoric that we do not need to subsidize any of these technologies. We are doing this out of a for-profit model. If we look at the higher carbon prices, we only have $5 per ton today, and actually use a higher price, we will actually decrease our emissions even faster, according to studies by the IMF. And if we have the carbon price like we should aspire to, we could really meet our net zero targets faster than we expected. So I just wanted to finalize my Chilean portion on energy to say that our energy future is our choice, not our fate. Amory Levin said that about 10 years ago. He delivered a nice talk in 2012 predicting what we had happen and ultimately happened as a country. Now, so today Chile has the third most ambitious climate policy according to German Watch. It's one of the 4 jurisdictions with acceptable net zero climate policies. But I have to just say one thing: there's no country that has a correct as doing enough. We must go into a mode in which we must do more than ever every year, and so we cannot really rely on thinking that we're done. I want to tell you a little bit about marine protection and the other legacy that we work on in the government of President Bachelet. Today we protect 42% of our economic exclusive zone, and that basically growing the protection from 4 to 42% in very short time. I just wanted to tell you that today we have multiple marine protected areas that have helped address some of the overfishing that we had seen in multiple species that you might be aware of. And we could see that there's an exponential growth of marine protection. And unfortunately, this has only stopped, and we need to continue to and expand our marine protection today. One of the ones that we did, and I think the secret was to be able to work with all the NGOs and have them collaborate, not compete. This is something that we needed to deal with. But for example, Wildlife Conservation Society did this beautiful marine protected area called Seno Almirantajo. They provided all the data for us to have the evidence to do this. With the Oceana, we did the Caleta Tortel, which is at the finalization of the River Baker. So therefore, we are protecting the River Baker in its estuaries towards the ocean. Very beautiful marine protected area that will protect also from salmon culture. We also have the Diego Ramirez Marine Park, and I just wanted to tell you about that one we did with National Geographic. The intention of it is to protect the overfished Chilean sea bass, or scientifically known as the Patagonian toothfish, a sort of prehistoric fish that requires 75 years to reach reproductive age and had lost 95% of its population in very few years because it became a species in style. And so therefore, this is a sanctuary in which we expect the recovery of the species. The Juan Fernandez archipelago was a place in which we also used to protect from the orange roughy, and you could actually fish and get and buy Juan Fernandez lobster, which has a premium and in the price, and it's fished in sustainable conditions, and therefore there's the denomination of origin in the region that really exemplifies that you could have sustainable fisheries. We also work with the Rapa Nui to have the biggest marine protected area in all the South America overall, even though it's more towards the Polynesia. We also transferred the national park to the Rapa Nui population. Here's the president of the Mauhenua movement, which means protectors of the earth, and they are now the park rangers for this Rapa Nui National Park. If you ever visit, that's who are going to be administering the national park. So it's a very massive marine protected area, complementing the Motu Moturihiba marine park that had been established in 2013. When we were doing this, we thought people probably are not going to ever visit a marine protected area or a national park. So what we did was to actually ban plastic bags and link it to the fact of ocean protection. And since then, we have also approved the first single-use plastic ban. Now, this story is not done until because basically there's a group, Tompkins Conservation, who had been wanting to protect the Baker River and all the Patagonia a long time. And once we pulled the plug on Iduraisin, we could also have a conversation with them to expand the Ornopiren National Park. We also had the very significant Douglas Tompkins National Park in Pumalin, which is something that he had established with his wife, Christine, and for many years. And they donated this land, around 1.2 million acres, which is the biggest land donation from a private person to a government. Corcovado National Park was expanded. The Melimoyu National Park was expanded. We also have the monumental Parque Nacional Patagonia, which is where Douglas Tompkins rests today after his very tragic death in 2015. Isla Magdalena National Park, Cerro Castillo National Park, Cahuéscar National Park, which altogether are 45,000 kilometers squared of national parks, and it's one of the biggest national park creations that we've had this century. So I'm very proud of having been able to participate this, because I had also visited the Patagonia, the Baker River. I had tattooed in my forearm that a symbol from the Lorax, just to remind myself that I couldn't let myself be part of the destruction of the Patagonia. And therefore, I'm very proud to have been able to fulfill the dream of Douglas Tompkins and my President Bachelet. This also had a lot of tension, of course, and there's in the end, another mine that wanted to be approved by the economic sectors. We basically pulled the plug on that mine, and that caused the resignation um, of the finance minister and the economy minister, and therefore we came out of this with very much a strength of leaving a legacy of conservation for President Bachelet. Today in COP15 for the biodiversity conference in Montreal, they're thinking about 30% protection. We reached 37% protection of our land and ocean. And actually now there's evidence that this is actually much better for having better fisheries, better agriculture, better tourism, better forestry. So whatever we spend on conservation has 5 times more benefits and cost. I'll just finish saying, we did the Escazú agreement, which are very proud to be doing the first environmental justice agreement in Latin America, which is today been ratified by the majority of the Latin American countries. Chile left it in 2018, but came back in 2022 with President Boric, and we're very proud to be back in the Escazú agreement. If you want to see more about the national park story, it's chapter 2 of our Great National Parks documentary narrated by Barack Obama, is available on Netflix, and it shows something that's much more immersive than my crappy slides here. President Bachelet got the Champions of the Earth Award for the best environmental policy in the world that year. But I just want to say the most important thing that I come from, as a conclusion, having seen her change on this, and in her final speech on this, says Chile's greatest environmental achievement is that the environment is no longer a sectoral issue for specialists or idealists. It's now an imperative and any discussion on the economy, energy, territorial planning, housing, international relations, or transportation. So basically, it's something that needs to be everywhere in what we do. Now I'll just do shortly about the Methane Hub, which is a philanthropic collaborative launched in COP26. We are operating today and globally with operations in Africa, Europe, the US, and in Latin America, focusing on methane mitigation. Methane mitigation, for those who haven't followed, since it's a very potent greenhouse gas, whatever we do in the short-lived, if we do something on methane, we'll be able to actually, by the time we require, as we establish the decarbonization. And so therefore, it's a good guardrail to keep 1.5 alive and prevent the irreversible tipping points that we want to prevent. And therefore, it's coming from agriculture, basically livestock, from waste, from energy, from the developing world is where it's going to actually be growing a lot, while the developed countries have actually stabilized their emissions for a long time. and therefore we need to use multiple different information. And we're using satellite information to highlight what we could achieve. We could actually go into large emitting sources and prevent that emissions from occurring, and actually show the progress without having to look at the end of the year for what we've done. And these years, there's multiple satellite platforms that are going to be established today. So there's a lot of momentum going for methane mitigation globally, and the Methane Hub is at the center of this. Many of us that are today at the Methane Hub did this because we knew that while we've done a lot on on energy, on transportation, we are not guaranteed success on the waste and agricultural sectors. The food system is not guaranteed to be sustainable, and that's why we're here at the Methane Hub also, to be able to reduce emissions even more.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Marcelo. This has just been absolutely educational. We will share that for anyone that liked access to the slides. We'll make sure to put those in the description notes after today's call so that you can access those and see them in more in-depth information later. I know that we have plenty of questions in the Q&A, and I think, Sabrina, we'll probably only have time for you to tee up the favorite one that you see. But before we do that, Marcelo, if you feel comfortable, can you also reflect a little bit more of us for those tuning in the US who often have a lens that is, focused on our own domestic goals and the ups and downs of what we're able to achieve? Did you see progress? Did you see inspiration? Did you see hope within COP27? Were there any stories in the last couple of weeks that I know when you were there with Madeline, with Joe? Thank you again, Joe, for making this connection today with Marcelo. Any anecdotes or stories you'd like to share for the good of our volunteers here in the US?
I'll tell you two things that I think are really important. When Jennifer Morgan, formerly executive director of Greenpeace, and Maisa Rojas, Minister of the Environment for Chile now, we're now an IPCC scientist, they get together. I thought that, what they wanted to do, for those who haven't followed, they were tasked to do the loss and damage portion of the agreement. And the politician in me said, that's probably not a winning topic. It's never been made any progress. But you never need to underestimate the capacity of the commitment from people to do things, and how two people can actually do something different than the rest. There's a thing with environment ministers. Many times it's a consolation prize. Not a lot of people that are environment ministers have really dreamt to be that, but it does make a difference when that does happen. And Maisa did that, Jennifer did that, and they achieved this loss and damage agreement, which shows that things can change. And it doesn't take a lot of people to do that. So I just want to call on you guys to never underestimate your own power. The capacity that the changes that we've seen in Chile have been driven by civil society. The political establishment, which I was very agnostic of, did not get this. Still doesn't get it fully. It's still within the environmental movement that actually gave Chile the opportunity to have a better growth pathway, more economic stability, lower energy costs. It wasn't the incumbents that said this. It was the people that didn't really settle for the explanation that the experts said. So in the US side, I think we've learned also a lot. The thing with the getting rid of all the coal that wanted to happen. The economic system has shifted, and it doesn't matter who's in office. It's going to be renewable. Doesn't matter if you like coal, you dig coal. It's not going to happen, because it's something that something that uses energy that has a cost. And whereas the sun and the wind are free, and the technology can only drop in costs, right? So therefore, it's forces that are going in different directions, and that's why renewable energy is going to win. So I was very excited to see President Biden's speech. He commits 100 times more climate finance than what is annually deployed by by North America. So this is a game changer, and I think that you guys are off to a good start. I do think the lesson learned from Chile, it shouldn't ever be a partisan thing. In Chile, it's not a partisan thing. We have the left wing, right wing. My head of Latin American and waste initiatives in the GMH is from the Piñera administration, and we believe the same things. Climate, we got to fight against climate change.
Here is to that, Marcelo. Thank you so much. Sabrina, if you wanted to just let us know, I know that we've got a lot of wonderful questions. Which one is bubbling to the top or is the most upvoted for you that we can ask Marcelo here to close us out for the first half today?
The question that we're asking live is, do you have any thoughts on why Chile is so successful in advancing environmental policies compared to other countries, both in South America and the rest of the world?
I think it's about being solid fundamentally on economics. Okay, so if you think about, let's say, Argentina or Venezuela, they've been subsidizing fossil fuels, and that really helps hinders the capacity to change this overall. Even though I've been very critical of the current government in Chile subsidies of fossil fuels, we don't have a lot of history. We like to keep the economics clear, and the narrative is that pollution causes externalities, and it's bad free market if you're not incorporating. It's a market distortion if you're not incorporating the price of pollution. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that drives our change, that the solutions that we provide don't require for you to be funneling in a whole bunch of money that we know is not going to be able to be deployed all the time. We have other things to do with our resources, and it's better to set up a market-based solution in which most of these investments have been done by the private sector.
Well, we are all about market-based solutions as well. Thank you so much, Marcelo, for obviously your incredible perspective across so many spheres of influence that your career has touched within the climate policymaking process. I think that we are deeply struck by all of the examples that you provided, and I know that we will be sure to follow up with the Q&As that we've left here in our forum. So just know that we look forward to continuing on in this vision and this legacy for enacting a lot of that same market-based approach within our own worlds and for our ongoing work within Citizens Climate Lobby and Citizens Climate International. And we also know it's the weekend and you probably have other commitments right now that you're welcome to stay on for the last part of our call today, but we also entirely understand if you have to drop off to attend to other matters too.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to go back to the camping trip with my kids. So see you later. Thanks for
Hey, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Marcelo.
Bye-bye. Thanks. See ya.
Oh, wonderful. All right, so let's talk about updates from the field that we've been working on. Again, that was a enriching conversation. We're so grateful for Marcelo's time here today. First off, I'd love to just ask about all of those lobby meetings that you've been having. I know that our numbers overall that Amy Bennett has shared with me this week have confirmed that we collectively have held or confirmed 259 meetings where appointments have been set, and that there are 433 confirmed appointment setters. Wow. And what kind of an impact is this having? Well, as of yesterday, one of our primary asks for this lobby drive, the RISE Act, which I mentioned earlier, now has 26 House co-sponsors. This is a bill that less than 1 month ago, before our lobby days, had only 3 total co-sponsors in the House. And on the Senate side, there are now 3 additional bipartisan sponsors as well, thanks to CCL's efforts, bringing the total to 23 co-sponsors as well. And as I've hinted at, we've been mobilizing CCLers to write their House representatives, asking them to co-sponsor the RISE Act. And now we are expanding that action to include senators. So we'll be sending out that email and text message early next week to encourage everyone to take that action. And if you want to in your chapter meetings, or even to do that right now, we'll put that link again in the chat for people to be able to take action and immediately make an impact. And a quick reminder as well on lobbying, not to forget to submit your meeting minutes after your incredible meetings. So far through the fall lobby drive, we've had 88 meeting minutes I know submitted. And additionally, in the month of November, beyond our lobby efforts, you generated 4,423 phone calls and letters to your members of Congress, 125 outreach events, published 108 letters to the editor, and held 27 Grasstops meetings in this last month alone. So thank you. We know that each and every one of you and each and every one of these events and actions has a beautiful story behind it. And so a little window into the incredible work that you and your teams have been doing. One of my favorite CCL blog posts and series really this year has been Katie Zakreski's work on With Gratitude. We'll put a link to that in the chat where you can make sure if you haven't yet to find and follow that. And we just wanted to thank each and every one of the featured stories profiled in this wonderful series so far. I know I speak on behalf of the whole staff that it's so energizing for me to read about the creative, dedicated efforts that you find ways to accomplish each and every day in your climate advocacy. And in that spirit, our communication teams actually wants me to announce that there's a plan beginning next year to feature a story in our weekly briefing each week for a CCL chapter doing this kind of work. So if you'd like to get a leg up and obviously start having the chance to share the stories that you and your chapter are up to and have them be featured in our weekly briefing, go to the link that we're going to put in the chat to make sure to start sharing your story. That's cclusa.org/chapter-profile. And we'll make sure to share that in multiple ways as well. All right, so I am next going to pass it to my dear friend, Topher Anderson, to allow us to get an update on where the year-end appeal stands and how we can all help out. Topher, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. So as Brett mentioned, we are in the midst of our year-end fundraiser, and we are now over a third of the way to our $1.5 million goal. So this is an amazing start. And as we're looking towards the end of the year, we still need to raise that remaining 2/3. And we know that hitting this goal is really important because it makes up a substantial part of our budget every year. And being fully funded ensures that you, our incredible volunteers in the field, have the training, the tools, and the support that you need to be effective climate advocates. It also allows us to reach and recruit volunteers, especially in districts that might need extra help, or in districts where it's really strategic to get that congressional support to then pass legislation. And just this year, we've all celebrated that we played a key role in passing the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's been amazing. But through it all, it's important to know that we never stopped working on both sides of the aisle. As Brett just shared, we've recruited 26, I think, co-sponsors to the RISE Act, and we've helped pass 4 bipartisan laws in the last 3 years. So as we look at the next Congress, we know that there's no one better positioned to make climate a bridge issue and keep building that political will to pass climate legislation for a livable world. So I'm here today to ask for your help in keeping that momentum. If you haven't already, I ask that you consider making a year-end donation today at whatever amount makes sense for you. You can go to cclusa.org/donate to make a gift and track our progress. And if you've already donated, I just want to say thank you so much. Please consider taking a moment to spread the word to your friends and family. And let's go do it now. Onward. Back to you, Brett.
Thank you so much, Topher, for that. That is absolutely one thing that each and every one of us can do, or maybe already has. And so we appreciate anyone that hasn't yet to check out that link in the chat, and we'll jump in and make sure to also share how this connects to our monthly action sheet. So in the eternal words of Mark Reynolds, what are we doing this month, people? Well, for December's monthly action sheet, here is what CCL's team recommends doing together at your local chapter gathering. Again, a reminder that you can find this action sheet if you go to cclusa.org/action sheet. And let me review each of our 5 actions. Number 1, you can use our Take Action worksheet to launch your policy advocacy. If you're curious about where to find that worksheet, it's available as a download as part of this month's action sheet. You can also search in CCL Community for the Chapter Action Planning worksheet. You'll see the resource detailed right here. On page 1 of that worksheet, what we're asking you to do is think as your chapter about what you are personally excited about with CCL's policy agenda. What areas would you like to take on and explore? Again, we do not expect all chapters to do all areas of our policy agenda. And we'd also like you to think about what might be most relevant or applicable in your community or home state. Are there any areas or issues that are most important or energizing for your member of Congress as well? Use that discussion to really energize and think through as a chapter where you'd like to focus your efforts for 2023 collectively. And then the wonderful thing is on that second page of the worksheet, you'll have a chance to start brainstorming for any of the policy areas that you'd like to take on. Who's on the team? What's the plan? Which levers, those levers of political will that you'd like to pull in order to generate those efforts forward. You can see here as an example on the screen, Todd and his local team have filled out this as if they are also taking on the CCL focus of building electrification and efficiency. And this worksheet, again, is straightforward, simple, and a wonderful way after you're completing it too, to post it on your chapter's group page or share it out so that other people that maybe couldn't make that planning effort know how they can plug in the year ahead as they also join in the efforts. So that's the first action. The second thing we want to do is chapter development action. It's a bonus action to celebrate your chapter's success. We'd like you to think about a way that you can celebrate all the things that you've accomplished with your team in 2022. You can create a kudo board, you can have a chapter party, you can honor your volunteers with a whole host of other ideas. We wanted to make sure that you were thinking about how to get that out there and celebrate and slow down to reflect on all that you have achieved. We also want you, if you're interested, to ask your friends and family to donate to CCL for the holidays. As Topher just shared, our year-end appeal runs through December 31st, and friends can dedicate their gift in your name when they make a donation at citizensclimate.org/give. So there's some great activities and ideas for that in the actual action sheet. And you can also do so with your social media post. We have a wonderful social media toolkit for the fundraiser where you can see example posts and graphics, and you can share your story of how CCL has empowered you on social media and tell your story within your personal network that way as well. And with that, we also have our communications exercise this month, practicing leading with who we are by telling your story. And again, we think of this as a three-part story arc. You can start by giving background about what worried you about climate change before you discovered CCL. You can then reflect on how joining the CCL community has encouraged you to do more and feel effective in your work. And then you can think through how you see your CCL work contributing to building an effective climate movement overall. If you're looking for some specific examples, the action sheet this month has wonderful stories, and we'd absolutely love to hear you share yours in the forums after you've done this with your chapter 2. So in closing today, what I'd actually like to do, given that we've done so much together this year, and it's really hard to wrap our heads around all of it, to help put this all in context, in addition to that amazing With Gratitude CCL blog series that I highlighted earlier, CCL's Executive Director, Madeline Pera, put the following story of our year in review that I'd like to share some of the excerpts and highlights with each of you. So let's celebrate together as we go through 2022. Let's think back to January, where CCL mobilized in support of climate action during reconciliation with a goal of 10,000 messages to President Biden in Congress, where we reached 16,819. In February, we set a new goal of 40,000 messages to Congress in support of by April, and we achieved that goal and exceeded it to 42,246. In March, we held the second annual CCL Conservative Climate Leadership Conference, really our first in-person conference since COVID, and we got 5 Republican members of Congress to speak at our keynote. In April, you all at CCL chapters held 960 outreach events, including tabling, presenting, film screening, grass top and editorial board events, chapter meetings, almost doubling that initial goal we set of 500 action tracker reports. And let's keep moving down the list. In May, not to be swayed, we continued forging ahead with returning to our DC conference planning despite that pandemic. We aren't doing in-person lobbying this last year, but we will this coming year as another demonstration of excitement and support. In June, we focused on rolling out our policy agenda with the outline that we provided in the actual June conference speech from Madeline. In July, we as staff decided that budget reconciliation was over due to all of the drama that we were seeing in Congress. Negotiations felt dead, so we decided to start pursuing our policy agenda based on that outcome. But in August, the Inflation Reduction Act was introduced and passed. We generate 9,735 contacts to Congress in 2 short weeks and hold our first ever bill signing party. And what do we do this fall? We didn't slow down, that's for sure. We held our first virtual inclusion conference. Staff went into high gear on defining and messaging around our policy agenda. In October, we held our first ever Earth Day election edition across the country with 82 events. In November, we had 1,957 election season events from June through November election. Hundreds of volunteers, many of you are on the call today, partnered with the Environmental Voter Project to phone bank as well. And for that, we thank you. And just this month, as we already shared, we had a policy agenda rolled out with our virtual national conference. We are lobbying Congress, and the RISE Act is already gone from 4 to 27 co-sponsors. What a year in review. What an incredibly powerful year, obviously, 22 has been. And to close out today, what I'd love to do is just make a full circle in my own life for you. In August, I hosted the call right before going on paternity leave, and I shared with each of you how thankful I was for your dedicated efforts to make this session in Congress the most ambitious and climate action oriented in our country's history. And it felt personal. And now today, I want to proudly share that we have a beautiful, beaming, cherub-cheeked 4-month-old that has absolutely filled our home with such joy. We named him Quest. Here he is. You can say hi, Quest, which is Latin for that which is sought out for, to seek for. Not only in celebration of the long journey that it's been for Julie and I in having our own biochild, but also to commemorate the commitment and pursuit that each and every one of us in the climate movement has made in our shared work on bending that arc of our future together. A quest that's so much larger than any of us individually on our own. And so on behalf of Quest and the future that he faces, a future where terms like mid-century and even 2100 no longer feel like abstract or far off concepts, we want to thank each of you for the work you get up every morning to do to make our world a better place for him and for the next generation to grow up into. So with that, thank you. Much love to each of you in your winter holidays ahead. And we'll close with an inspirational snippet from Gigi's speech at the conference. Thank you all.
Leadership doesn't require this innate talent to lead. People think leaders should already be inspiring and charismatic from birth, but that's untrue. The fact is, a lot of people don't have this so-called natural talent for leadership. They're introverts or they're awkward. That's how I was. I didn't have any natural born talent for people or for leadership, but I still had a strong will to help fight climate change, and I had a vision of action that I believed in. So I led anyways. I kept my chapter running. I strategized. I organized meetings and events. And at the same time, I learned how to empower and inspire and all those other skills I didn't have experience with. And I managed to do most of it in my bedroom with YouTube on in the background. My leadership may not have been perfect or pretty, but it worked and it helped my chapter. That is what mattered. If you're like me, if you want to make a big change, but you're not a natural leader, then I encourage you to lead anyway. As a Grasstops team leader, a media manager, a chapter leader, whatever. Yes, it's a learning process, and yes, you will make mistakes. But during that time, you'll be making a bigger and bigger dent on the climate crisis. You'll be able to help in ways that you couldn't before without being a leader. And best yet, you'll be helping others to do the same. In the end, you won't be leading a random group of strangers. You're leading a group of people who are itching to take action against climate change. And you just need the guidance of a good leader to take that first step. If you can empower your members to believe in the importance of their actions by simply showing examples of real people's past climate victories, you are leading well. If you can make resources easily accessible to eager members who want to learn more, you are leading well. Of course, there's much more to leadership as a whole, but it doesn't have to be this complicated and intimidating task. It doesn't have to be noble or pretty. It can be simple, it can be straightforward. As long as it helps your chapter members, then you are succeeding as a leader.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.